as a physician, not only do you need to stop fearing death, you need to stop fearing pain. You need to stop fearing the wound within the person in front of you. And you need to understand that is the path. Go into that. Go into that with that patient. Tell me about the heartbreak that you have.
Welcome to Back to the Future podcast. My name is Victor Sadia, and I talk with brilliant minds and hearts of people who want to uproot and transform the current health and wellness paradigm. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today we have Dr. Zach Bush. Dr. Zach Bush is a physician specializing in internal medicine, endocrinology, and hospice care. He's an internationally recognized educator and thought leader on the microbiome as it relates to health, disease, and food systems. He founded the Seraphic Group and the nonprofit Pharma's Footprint to develop root cause solutions for human and ecological health. He's a poet, businessman, father, philosopher, clinician, and social advocate at the same time. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today we have Dr. Zach Bush. Zach, thank you so much for being here.
A pleasure to be with you all.
So you had a Spanish literature major at the University of Colorado, and you wrote about Cien Años de Soledad.
I did.
What's that about?
Yeah, I think I fell into that path through a number of different experiences in life. But my family, we grew up outside of a small town in Colorado and didn't have money to travel with a big family much, especially abroad. So instead, my parents did a brilliant thing, which was bring the world to us. And so we had families and individuals from around the world stay with us for weeks or months at a time while they were starting at the university nearby or whatnot. And so this gave me a huge exposure to a lot of cultures. And one of our close friends that came out of that experience were from near Mexico City in Querétaro there, and they became very close friends, and I think that influenced a little bit of the love of the language for me, for sure. But definitely knew I wanted to speak another language, pretty early in my life, and had some influential Spanish teachers in middle school, high school kind of range that really were positive effects. And then by the time I got to college, in my first year of college, one of the teaching assistants from El Salvador became a really close friend, and he took me down and stayed with his family down in El Salvador for a couple months that first summer after my first year of college. And that was really a powerful time because El Salvador was just coming out of their 13-year civil war, and it was the closest I had come to really being intimately witness to the devastations of war and the effects on generations that come after war. At that time, there were 7 women for every 1 male in San Salvador. They're just completely demolished that. And so as I looked into that lens of, the deep, sociopolitical divides and sociopolitical corruption that was existing at that time, and unfortunately still is very prevalent today throughout much of Central and South America, and I would suggest there's many variations of that same thing in the G8 and the big, Western civilization communities. We have so much weird corruption and crossing of special interest money influencing politics. And unfortunately, that usually plays out in a very abusive fashion towards those that are most vulnerable, which would be women within these countries and the like. So that got me interested in sociopolitics through the lens of colonialism and Spanish and all that. And so I got into that, I think, almost through that sociopolitical lens. I did a lot of debate in political debate in Spanish by my senior year. And Cien Años de Soledad was an amazing thing that I think really has come to influence my life deeply. It's the genre of Magic Realism, and that genre I feel like has really come into alignment, or perhaps my life has come into alignment with Magic Realism and my understanding of our spirituality. And Cien Años de Soledad gives us a glimpse of how we create the world in which we live, and how it can be far more miraculous than some sort of Newtonian physics belief of how mechanisms of life occur, or mechanisms of socioeconomics. and start to really realize that we have an opportunity to create a complete metamorphosis of our own selves, our own society, our own cultures within the context of this co-creative potential within us. So I think CNN just does a great job of capturing some of that energy.
I think that it's interesting how we've seen these genres as fictions, and the possibility of being probably even more real than what we think is real, that is measured by numbers, by science, by Newtonian physics. It's still very entrenched in our culture that there's a big divide between man and nature, between mind and body, and all these dualisms that we see. What do you think, so that we start with health sciences, what can we learn from magic realism and in terms of the health sciences that we have in Western civilization?
Yeah, it's a really cool question. I don't think you've actually been asked that exact question yet on a podcast. So that's pretty good. Good job, Victor. You nailed a unique question there. But one of the ways in which we can look into that sphere of magic realism within biology is through the lens of genetics. And we came to believe that we were the result of our mother and father, and we had this very Mendelian kind of belief about genetic passage of information from mom and dad. And Mendelian science evolved out of studying pea plants and crossing the genetics of peas and seeing their phenotype and traits change. And that was the first kind of discovery of genetics, if you will, as to our understanding of the inherited structure of genetics in plants, and then of course in animals and humans. But what we're now learning over the last 30 years is that we were very mechanistic or Newtonian in our belief system and linear in our belief system of genetics. And what happened is that when we completely decoded the human genome, we found out that we only had 20,000 genes, which was really very confusing because we knew we had over 400,000 proteins in the body, and each protein was thought to be the expression of a single gene. And so the way in which only 20,000 genes could express 400,000 different proteins was a complete mystery. It was a very low number in biology as we understood it, because the fruit fly had 13,000 genes that we had decoded, and then the flea had 30,000 genes. So to find out that the human somehow lies between a flea and a fruit fly, this doesn't compute on our old mechanistic understanding of this. And so what we now had to birth over the last 30 years is our understanding of epigenetics, which is really how moment by moment the environment in which we live can reshape the bodies we express, which is an extraordinary thing. And we were right before the show, we were talking about your sweet family, and you guys are thinking about moving from the Acapulco area up into the mountains next year. And that shift will biologically change you, your wife, children. That's an amazing new understanding that it's not just what we eat that we have become. It's actually everything we touch, everything we breathe, the very genome of our environment. The genetics of the air we breathe is massive. There's 10 to the 31 viruses, which are genetic sequences in the air that we breathe. But there's many, many logarithms greater than that of microRNA, which are tiny little signaling mechanisms in the genetic code that go out into the air around us through respiratory secretions and the rest. And the microRNA and the virome, the whole data bank of potential new life with the viruses, is giving us the potential to rebuild a new body. And that speed is pretty extraordinary. Within days of changing your environment, whether it be your food environment, your physical geographic environment, you start to build a new and different body. And for many of my patients with really life-threatening conditions like cancer and the like, it's a really cool message that, number one, you can't heal something as aggressive as a cancer in the place in which you got it, because so many things have to go wrong for a cancer to occur. And the only thing I can tell somebody walking in is that wherever you are right now, or have been for the last 10 years, has had that influence on you. I can't tell you exactly what the 3,000 influences were, but I can tell you, you lived the perfect environment for a cancer to occur. And so one of the main things I do is have them fundamentally change their environment. And for some who are lucky enough to be able to change their location, I'll have them do that. If they don't have the flexibility of the money or whatever to do that, then I have them fundamentally change the environment in which they're currently living. Little details like change the position of the toothbrush from one side of the sink to the other, change the side of the bed you wake up on, move the bed to a different room, start to sleep outside some of the time. Just, you got to think about how are you going to fundamentally change the feeling of being alive in the space in which you choose to live. And that's going to create this magic realism effect where you can actually create a new body in which cancer does not exist. Cancer is not an invasive disease. At its beginning, it's a lonely cell, highly injured, that gets separated from the greater organism. And so you want to find a lifestyle in which you welcome all of yourself back into life. Too many of us compartmentalize our emotional traumas, our emotional disappointments, our broken expectations, and then leave these quiescent, dead parts within us as we bury these things. And a lot of living life has to do with unburying this. You can imagine this like, tilling up a field or something like that. You've got to get motion into the life of the planet. And we can do that through emotion code therapy or, many different modalities of changing the energy within the body. When we train people to let the emotions flow through them rather than get locked into some, part within them. So the magic realism on the genetic code is that right now you have the flexibility to create 4 million different bodies from the genes that your parents gave you. So if you're not happy or thriving in the body that you're currently in, pick one of the other 3,999,999. Get another body, and you have the ability to do that. And you can manifest this through this extraordinary connection to genomics of the air you breathe. That there's 10 to the 31 viruses in the ocean water, so go swim in the ocean. There's 10 to the 31 viruses in the soil, so go dig in the soils. And when you're hearing this, you might think viruses are a bad thing because we've kind of demonized viruses recently, but viruses are literally the new genetic potential of life, and they're put out into the air and space and soils and waters for life to march forward. We would not have life on the planet and the diversity we have it, the beauty we have it, the resilience we have it, if not for the viruses. And so it's in our isolation from nature that we start to lose our genetic potential of magic realism. So that's at the kind of the biologic level, but things get way cooler at the biophysics level, which is that we actually disappear every millionth of a second and reappear. And so this extraordinary reality of the relative solidity that I feel in my body right now is a mirage. This is actually the effect of lots of electromagnetic field expressing itself in particle state every millionth of a second. But the reality is 99.999% of me is vacuum space. And there actually is no solid body that persists from one moment to the next. It keeps remanifesting out of the vacuum. And so the fact that I'm blinking in and out of reality every millionth of a second brings us into that magic realism of 100 años de soledad, in which we are seeing the potential to change the literal landscape of our reality, second to second, moment by moment. So how do we age? How do we get disease? We do that by bringing the past forward with us. And so the name of your podcast is interesting. If we start to think about that as, we have an ability to carry the past forward to continue to express dysfunction and disease. We also have the ability to carry the past forward to great wisdom. And so we have to choose what we're going to bring forward with us into the new reality that we're going to manifest in the next millionth of a second. And when we start to learn to let go of duty, greed, guilt, responsibility as a concept, doubt, shame, as we start to lose those things in our realization that we are actually just us. We are a person that is an animated soul, an animated body moved by a soul to do as we do. And we are trying to bring a body and its lifestyle and its life into alignment with this light being that we would call a soul. And so once you come to terms with that, you realize you really can't screw things up because you're on your journey and you signed up for this journey. And the journey is unfolding in something much greater than the space-time continuum that you think of an 80-year life in. This is a space-time continuum that might have started at the very beginning of time itself. And so when we start to think about biophysics being based on astrophysics rather than biology, which is so temporal, we realize, wow, we're really missing our opportunity here to express our full vitality, our full potential of life, because we keep telling ourselves very finite versions of ourselves, and we fail to really open up the potential for where we're heading.
And talking about languages, it seems that the language of science is so powerful in both respects. In one sense, it can give us a lot of numbers and a lot of information, but if we follow that path, we might only get the mechanistic part of it. And the other part of the language in science is that it can give us this experience of interdependence, of being greater than ourselves. And it's even spiritual, like Newtonian physics and quantum physics might have different languages. And if you follow either one, it might give you a different experience of being alive, being part of the community, being part of the planet, even your own relationship with your spouse or your children. How can we reconcile, or not reconcile, but how can we use a lot of narratives? You mentioned magical realism, you mentioned now the language of science, and how can we use several kinds of languages to extol and to celebrate this mystery where we are involved in?
It's a great question. I think English is a dangerous language for us to use as the universal language right now around the country, or around the world rather. And in the same way, it's very dangerous that we use the US dollar as the global, reserve currency for the world. We have adopted a culture and a language and a socioeconomic structure around that language that is very powerful at describing the physical reality, but completely fails to mention the emotional reality, the psychospiritual reality, and all of that in the complexity of the language itself. And this was my biggest passion for Spanish, and why it was so fun to debate sociopolitics in the language of Spanish, is that you have a language that was inherently built on something deeper than the mechanisms of physics. It was built actually on philosophy. And there's only two pure sciences, as often said. There's two true pure sciences on the planet. It's physics and philosophy. But physics actually was an outspringing of philosophy at the time of the Greeks and the like. And so there's actually one science, which is philosophy. And we chose to only look through the lens in these last few centuries of physics, and we missed the whole beauty of philosophy. And I think largely you've got the nail on the head, is we did it largely by adapting to a language. I think we did it through the Germanic languages, and we did it through English as a concept. But those languages lost the magic. They inherently lost the magical quality of being alive, being in love, being, all of these different, manifestations of energy. And we came down to just appreciate, if this input, then this output. And so we became very mechanistic and linear by the Germanic and English languages, becoming the dominant ones of productivity and wealth through the socioeconomics that we built around those social norms. And it's not surprising that philosophy has a looser hand on something like profit. Like, profit seems like a very lame goal when you're using a language that appreciates the beauty of the sunrise and can really describe what it feels like to see the face of your child in the morning. Spanish and French and these languages, when I try to speak French, I'm terrible at it, but I literally feel like the words are dripping out of my mouth. Like there's just this liquidity to them, whereas there's this harsh start, stop to the English language or the Germanic languages, these guttural stops, these harsh endpoints. And when you speak Spanish, or you speak French, or you speak into some of the deeper indigenous languages of Sanskrit, which was maybe the origin language here in our modern day. But a great example of this in the United States is the Navajo language. The Navajo Nation, which bridges a lot of the southwest of the United States, was one of the largest, socioeconomic powers, sociopolitical powers when colonialism hit from Europe in the 1400s, but more so in the 1600s. And the Navajo language is one of the most extraordinarily, I would say, extraterrestrial sounding languages I've ever heard. It doesn't sound like anything I've ever experienced in the context of what I would call language. It's more similar to what I would expect from animals speaking to each other in a rainforest. It has this beauty of bringing so many textures into it and so many layers into a single word or phrase. The words "I love you" in Navajo, I won't say it because I'll butcher it, but when you hear somebody speak Navajo and they say, I love you, it stops your heart. It literally creates a physical experience of like, ooh, I felt that thing. And I heard the word and didn't know what it meant. And I was like, what the hell was that? And when they said it's I love you, I was shocked. I was like, what if we had a language that had the power to connect a physical experience to the meaning behind the word? And that's what I think we lost in this world of English and this world of Americanism at large. I think even if you go over to London, you feel and hear a more artistic approach to the use of the same language. Americans, as we've come to have a dominant, aspect to global awareness because of our media and movies and everything else, we have introduced people to the most monotone, most rudimentary version of communication. And because it's very good at put in an input and get a result, we built a socioeconomic machine out of that was very effective. And so it became dominant. But we need to step back and ask ourselves as humanity now, as we're on the brink of extinction, what do we want to express? Do we want to express more gross domestic product? Do we want to express more profit? Do we want to express more competition? Or would we like to express beauty? Would we like to express love? Would we like to express these things? So I think as you're looking into language as a new beginning, perhaps, for medicine, how do you talk about cancer when it's not about here's a cell that's taking over the body and blah, 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 and becomes, who are you? How did you get here? What did you love in your life? What are the things that just light you up? What turns you on in life? What makes you feel vital? What does it look like to create a lifestyle that elevates that experience? This is the romantic language of medicine that we try to practice in my clinic now, which is forget about the concept of disease. Discover the art of the human that's in front of you. There is an art that's been painted over many brushstrokes on a canvas that they would call their lifetime. And it is beautiful. You can't sit for 2 hours with a patient and not fall in love with them. They are just freaking amazing miracles of resilience and creativity and humor. I find humor in everybody, and a lot of people don't think they're funny until you give them time to dig deep on their own self, and then they crack themselves up and they find humor in what they thought moments ago was a mundane life suddenly brings color and joy to them when they're given them an opportunity to reflect on that beauty of their life. And so I think you're onto something there. If we can find a new language of medicine, find a new language of science that is much more expressive of the romantic languages, perhaps, we will approach this opportunity to see the lens through philosophy rather than physics, and understand physics to only be a small part of philosophy. And when we do that, we're going to get at what you said early in the podcast. You said something along the lines of we've come to see humans as separate from our nature. And that's actually, again, where English has failed us. If you look up the word nature in the Oxford English Dictionary, you end up with that description of everything in the world, landscapes, plants, minerals, everything as opposed to humans or anything humans have made. And so we not only wrote ourselves out of the definition of nature, we put ourselves in opposition to the definition of nature as opposed to humans and anything humans have made. So we are out of nature. Anything we can make is out of nature. And then the United States, when you look at the sociopolitics of this, it gets even deeper crisis. Independence of the United States of America as kind of a decree to Europe or England specifically, saying we're going to be a free nation. They had learned a lot from the Iroquois and the Navajo here in native pre-colonial governments that existed. And what they learned was something called natural law. And so this was not new to some of them. Benjamin Franklin was one of the gentlemen who penned a lot of the Declaration of Independence. And he had been studying 50 years earlier all of the writings of Confucius and some of the pre-Confucius work out of China. And Confucius and pre-Confucius looked at natural law as a method for the Chinese government to understand how to give back reverence and independence in some ways to the individual within that government that had long forgotten to understand the individuals as sovereign. And so Confucius did a beautiful job of spelling out sovereignty of the individual via an argument of natural law. And so Benjamin Franklin was well familiar with that. He went on to teach Alexander Hamilton a bunch of that. And he and Hamilton wrote an enormous amount of content that interestingly was really arguing against something that's pertinent today, which is a big document that came out in the 1850s from London that was arguing that we had too much human population on the earth and it was unsustainable. And it's funny when you read that now, because in the 1850s, we had, 1.2 million people in the world or something. Now we have nearly 8 million people, or 8 billion. We went from 1 to 8 billion people over this last, 200 years. And so it's funny that we were already sensing, oh my gosh, there's too many of us. We're too extractive. We're too destructive. We're going to kill this planet. That we had that viewpoint then. So they were riding on that. And first Benjamin Franklin, later Hamilton wrote beautifully some poignant pieces of natural law literature that pointed to the fact that when we bring ourselves into alignment with nature, there is no such thing as too many humans. And so we need to stop seeing ourselves as the problem. We need to start seeing our behavior as the problem. And that behavior being separated from nature is what's driving it. So I really celebrate your podcast here. You're doing the right thing by bringing us back to the future.
Thank you so much, Zach. So much to follow up on. You spoke about liquidity and how languages might give us a lot of textures and layers, and you mix French with English with Navajo. In the same way, I believe you as a clinician, as a father, as a poet, as a philosopher, as a businessman, as even a researcher and a social advocate, you are mixing a lot of labels on what we can label you on with. In the same way that you're mixing languages, you're mixing the languages of all these hats that you might put on, and you are creating, in effect, this new narrative of health, of how to be in this world with all our layers and our textures. This podcast is heard by a lot of health professionals who don't want to keep entrenched into a specific label. You are a cardiologist, you are a psychotherapist. And basically bringing together all these aspects of ourselves, which we have been separating because the industrial society has asked us to do that. And they say, don't mix business with pleasure, don't mix your personal life with your patient's life, or in the clinical setting, in the physician-patient relationship. And we are separating all these aspects. How do you keep conveying to health professionals to integrate all these personalities, all these languages into effectively, that's the way to create this new health narrative?
Yeah, I think it's critical far beyond medicine, but I think medicine is a very strong, paradigm of this labeling phenomenon. And when you label something, you create a finite identity to what was just a moment ago an infinite being, And we do this to ourselves throughout life. We decide we're a son or a daughter. We decide we're a student or a teacher. We decide we're a doctor or a lawyer. We decided we're a truck driver or whatever it is. And when we start to pinpoint our identity on a label, we've lost track of the magic realism in our reality. We have put ourselves into that small box. And the magic realism for me, in my own expression, is a work in progress. I've been on the podcast a few years ago. My bio said triple board certified, endocrinology, internal medicine, hospital care. I'm starting to prefer no introduction at all, in the sense that the only thing that you're going to know and care about at the end of this podcast is what it feels like for you to be next to me. And that's the magic realism. Yeah, I could be a heating and air conditioning guy, which I've done before. I've been a general contractor before. I've been a landscaper before, and I dug big muddy holes in sprinkler systems. But I guarantee you the experience of being next to me would have been the same for me then as it is now. And as I give up my titles of, my social titles of endocrinologist or whatever it is, I'm taking that to another level now, where for myself, I'm stopping the term doctor now. I don't feel like it's helpful for me to keep reinforcing that identity on myself, because I have the opportunity, I now know, to move into an infinite state. And even the word healer, which some people said, well, you should just go to this bigger thing. It's like, I don't know that I even want to sit here and heal things anymore. I think I'm really interested in taking the human experience via the biology, via the biophysics, into an opportunity to increase the amount of light energy that our bodies can hold. And I don't know what that word would be of that practitioner, but I can tell you it's freaking amazing to feel. When I take any technology or any nutritional practice or any breath work or any, psycho-spiritual, interface that we can take our patients through, and I see the lights go on in that human being and I see their vitality increase, that is what I am passionate about. And I know that I have the opportunity to explore that in my own body. Instead of sitting here reading tons of journal articles, I now spend much more time in meditation and listening inside of myself instead of all of the noise outside of myself. And what I'm finding myself to be is much more effective in everything I put my hand to if I walk into that moment in a better state of silence than I was a moment before. And the silence allows me to be an alert listener. And the thing that I'm really trying to listen to right now in my life is, what is this kind of compass feel like inside of me? I am, from the physics standpoint and biology standpoint, I'm a column of water, 70% water held within this column of cells. And water, as we know, is highly responsive to magnetic field. And the magnetic field and gravitational forces of the moon or the sun and the stars are why we can create a science of astrology and find out, wow, if we map the stars at the moment of your birth, we can actually tell you your personality. That trips me out. Like, how is that anywhere in the possible range of our current Western medicine concept of, but it works over and over and over again since the dawn of time. And so how is that possible? It's because you're simply a column of water holding a genetic data bank of potential. And everything around you is programming your epigenetic experience to express you now, not then, now. And so there's this cool thing that is happening to me now is I'm starting to let go of my birth chart astrology. I'm starting to pay attention to the astrology of my rebirth moments. I rebirthed in 2010 when I left the university setting. I rebirthed again 4 years later when I went through a divorce and found out that I could actually move my love from one of devotion to one of unconditional love, where whatever path was best for my wife was the best path for my wife. And I couldn't put a expectation of, well, that has to be with me, or that has to be in a nuclear family, or it certainly was like ludicrous to say, you have to do it this way or I'm not going to love you. It's suddenly, if there was a crisis of character, it wasn't because the marriage broke. It would have been if I refused to let love express itself unconditionally. And so I learned that through a very difficult journey, heartbreak, all that stuff. But what ended up manifesting was this new idea of like, what if we start to define not just our relationship to one another and as spouses, but our relationship to other humans or our relationship to our nature around us as unconditional? What does it look like to live an unconditional life? It means that you are willing to do the highest vibrational experience at any given moment, regardless of what that means for you and your sense of responsibility or duty, or these things that you've made up to give you a metric of value. Your metrics of how you value yourself have sold you very short. There's an opportunity for you and I to expand into a much greater expression of beauty, and therefore trigger in everybody around us the experience of love, because love is simply the experience of seeing beauty. And if we acknowledge that and we realize love is not something we can manufacture, that's why you can't actually be in love with somebody. You can't just keep being this source of love for somebody. You will run out of it because you can't actually generate it. it's a neurochemical event that lasts about 7 seconds that creates the sensation of I'm in love. We have to start to be in a state of vibration of recognizing beauty, and therefore we will experience an infinite love. And when we start to move into that recognition that beauty is the origin of love, we can start to fall in love with everything again, because there's beauty in everything. And we can fall in love with our own lives, the beauty of each chapter we lived, whether it been a really prosperous marriage or a difficult marriage that you went through, or incredible time raising healthy kids, or really challenging time raising kids that were suffering from disorder and disease. Maybe you went through a really productive career and life chapter there, or maybe you struggled financially for decades. There's beauty in all of it. There's beauty in the temporal nature of these chapters we live. And when we recognize that, then we don't have to go practice self-love. Self-love happens immediately and fully when you see the beauty. And so I would encourage all of you, as you start to think about your career as medical physicians or scientists or whatever it is, back up a couple of layers and find your own unified philosophy of self, rather than the physics of your mechanisms of expression. Find your unified philosophy. Who are you? Why are you here? Why did you show up at the tipping point of a species? We could go extinct in the next 80 to 100 years. You showed up right now to be perhaps either somebody who would recognize the beauty of us before we disappear, or perhaps somebody who would recognize the beauty of us and rewrite our future such that we don't go extinct. You showed up in either way, an extraordinarily important witness to this last chapter of the humanity that we've known for the last couple 100,000 years.
That's powerful, my friend. Thank you. In terms of this highest vibration, we usually think that it's all let's see life in pink, you know. But you describe all these rebirth, which entail death, of a personality, death of a certain kind of relationship. It entails also grieving and acknowledging trauma, and even seeing the beauty in all the trauma that we live. In that sense, I've come to think of healing, or even any act of healing is an act of creation, and that our definition of health must include death, the beauty also of death. And that's something that I've heard you speak before, and how I think it's very powerful, because when you think about how to show up with your highest vibration, you are also showing up with the vibration of death in its beauty, in its magical realism. Because at the end of the day, that's what magical realism told us, that death is not as we've thought about it in our realism.
That's it. Yeah, it's an incredibly important place for us to begin as physicians and practitioners of any sort in the health field, is to lose the fear of death. If you practice medicine out of fear of death, you will inevitably create an experience for yourself and the patient where you only focus on the 0.01% of life that is death, and you make that the whole reality. And that's what happens in doctor's office after doctor's office after doctor's office around the world right now. You come in, patient comes in, okay, this is stage 4 breast cancer. You can run through, okay, this is the chemotherapy regimen, this is that, this is that, this is that. Your chance of dying in the next 2 years is this, blah, blah, blah. That meeting might take half an hour, hour and a half, and it's 99.9% dominated by the discussion of cancer, which is a tiny fraction of the human being's current biology, and even a smaller fraction of their lifetime experience. But you've boiled them down to this one foreign, concept or abstract concept of disease, and that they're going to walk out of your office thinking they are diseased, and they are destined for death at this endpoint. And so you've created a finite status of scarcity throughout every level of their psyche and spiritual identity in that moment. And so it's because you're afraid that the patient will die, because you are subconsciously afraid that that's going to be your responsibility. And so we need to let go of that belief system, that concept of patient is alive, I'm successful, patient is dead, I failed. patients signed up for this life eons ago, is my current belief around souls. Souls are these energetic spheres of energy that seem to animate biology. And it's a mysterious thing when you watch death. And as a hospice doctor, it was 80 patients a week I was losing. And so when you're seeing that rate of death, it's extraordinary that for all of the pathways to that moment, the moment looks so similar again and again and again. And even if the patient is so drugged up and on life support and so disconnected from capacity to communicate, you can see the life disappear from their biologic status instantly. And it's not necessarily when the heart stops beating or whatnot. It's at the moment of true energetic elimination, when the energy field of what we might call a soul pulls back from that biology. I've worked on patients for many minutes, sometimes hours, where they're going in and out of cardiac arrest and all this. And in doing that again and again, I got pretty good at sensing this person is still here. And you also get pretty good at sensing this person is gone and we should stop. We should call this code. And so as a senior resident and all that in a hospital, you are frequently in that position of, are you going to call the code or are you going to continue the code? And you get better and better at that over time, of recognizing that moment where there is no more animation to this physical experience. And it's fascinating to me that we fear that moment, because one thing that we have proven again and again and again in physics is you cannot destroy energy. There is no end to energy. It can change form, but it never ends. And so in that moment that we see the passage of the energetic animation of a human body pass on, we have to understand that it immediately has to take a different form. It's not something that can, like, maybe someday that soul goes into, immediately that energy field is going to be connected to new varieties of energy or physical matter in the universe. Maybe it combines with a star, for all I know. Maybe it combines with the planet itself, but it is not going to dissipate and disappear. It can't. It's always there. And so as we start to understand and hear the stories that come out of these near-death experiences, we know that nobody's in panic at that last moment on the other side. They've crossed the veil now. They've let go of the mind and the psyche, but they're still an animated being, knowing that they're embodied, knowing that they're dying often, and then suddenly being connected telepathically to everybody they love. And they know exactly where their mother is at that moment. They know exactly where their sister is at that moment. And they talk to these people and they interact with them in this astral plane or this higher state of awareness. And one of the ones that I did on my Global Health Education Summit, you can find on my website for free, but we did a death and rebirth panel, and I had a couple of near-death experiences described, and one of them was a drowning, and he was underwater without a pulse for eight minutes, and so that typically leaves you pretty brain dead without that length of time. He was a physician when this happened. He's a pathologist, neuropathologist, and so if any scientist was going to be prepared to understand the ramifications for 8 minutes without a pulse, it would have been this guy. And Dr. Cummings, when he came back, had this incredible memory of all of his, awareness. He could see, even though he was lodged under these logs under a river rushing, he knew where the raft was that he had come out of, and he could see them paddling hard towards them. He could see all these things happening. He could see the rescue efforts, but at the same time, he was talking to loved ones around the world and knew what they were doing at that moment and the like. When he came back into the body, he was neurologically intact very quickly, with the exception of one injury that he is left with, a decade later, a persistent injury to the brain in which he does not have a sense of time. And so that's a pretty cool injury to have. And so he can sit down on a project and suddenly be there for 8 hours and have no idea. It feels like 5 minutes, feels like nothing to him. Or he can, be waiting for 5 minutes and feel like it's been forever. And so he's had this interesting journey since then of learning how to live without the sense of time. And that I think has a lot of beauty to it in a poetic way of how we should all start to think about this rebirth for ourselves. There is no time when it comes to energy, when it comes to life as it exists at the biophysics level. There's no end to life. There will certainly be many rebirths to the energy field that you generate. I find it intriguing that your energy field might take forward wisdom from your life. But what I'm pretty convinced of is that the low vibration of emotional trauma, the low vibration of human pain, suffering, cannot be carried forward in the same way by a soul. These high vibration, energetic, things that exist outside of our body but animate us, I don't think can pick up that human pain. I don't think that's changing the soul. Instead, I think it can only really carry forward the highest vibration frequencies that we can generate. And those things are the recognition of beauty, love, and sense of connection.
How can we take these two stories, the one from Dr. Cummings and the last moments of biological life of a patient, into how can we extrapolate these two into the global narratives of the big crises that we're living, like poverty, global warming, racial violence, forced migration, and all these time spans that we keep hearing that we might end things ourselves. Like you said, we might be on the tipping point of the last few generations of the human species. How can we know that? How can we remember for the future that this could happen without carrying the low vibration of trauma, of loss, of anger, of grief, to systemically joining political, economic, cultural forces into a new interdependent body of humans and non-humans, to transform this event?
Yeah, it's a critical question. It's the last question we have to answer as humanity at this point of can we bring ourselves into reconciliation with nature? To do that, we're going to have to bring ourselves into reconciliation with ourselves. And so how are we going to do this? And I think that my hope is that we will turn to nature for the lesson rather than try to think of it ourselves. Because natural law has worked for tens of thousands of years in human experience. But we have the opportunity to even move natural law further down the road as we come to understand biology has pointed to the reality that we are singular, not just with the natural law of humans, which is, if you go to Wikipedia, it will tell you about natural law of humans, which just points to human law structures, human socioeconomics. But what it doesn't talk about is the bacteria and fungi below your feet. It doesn't talk about the virome in the air that you breathe and how important that is to our existence and how important it is to our survival and resilience for a future to get out of the toxicity that we've created. We're going to need partnership with the bacteria, fungi, and viruses, which are the mechanism by which we move past stressors and we become adaptive and we find the adaptive path forward to avoid extinction. And so if we now take this opportunity to look at natural law and work in rights of nature to that, because the first tenet in natural law is really every human is sovereign. No human can be owned or manipulated or extracted by another human. We need to obviously advance that to all of nature. Nature is sovereign. The eagle is sovereign. The fish in the sea is sovereign. The bird of the air is sovereign. No other life form has the right to mindlessly extract from that sovereign being. That sovereign being can give up its life in many different ways because it may want to cycle up, might want to up-level that soul energy within it. And that's how I see our deaths of our loved ones. I think they picked those points of exit as carefully as was picked the moment of entry. We talked about the astrology in the birth chart. I am frustrated that we are not doing the astrology of the rebirth point. Why are we not looking at the astrology of the moment our grandparents passed away? Because it will tell us something of the promise that they left us. It will tell us something of the way they saw their life at the end of it. and the life that they look forward to now. What did they just rebirth into? My God, they're going to be an Aries, not a Scorpio. How interesting. That's going to be an opportunity for us to see the continuum of life, and our endpoints are going to be recognized as critical as our entry points to this life. And so humanity coming in as Homo sapiens sapiens 200,000 years ago was a chosen moment for the consciousness of the planet, for the intelligence expressed and the beauty expressed in nature. We are the highest vibrational experience so far in nature. If you look at the amount of light we hold at the cellular level, you can look at it in statuses of density. Light is what creates density within matter. And so right now we thrive in the third density, or we exist in this third density of light energy. The other animal species tend to be in the second density of light. And so there's a little bit less light per cubic centimeter in primates even, and things like this. And so you look out then into crystals and minerals or water itself, and it has energy to it, but it's at a lower level of density per cubic centimeter than what we hold in our body. So at this moment, we are the highest vibrational event on this planet. There's a fourth density that we can reach. There's a fourth density that biology is capable. There's a fifth density that is capable, that is possible. And so my fascination right now is, I don't think we can actually solve for the question you asked. I don't think we can, in a linear fashion, go solve for all the traumas we've caused to each other. I don't think we can forgive each other fast enough to resolve the pain and suffering that we have caused one another in colonialism and extractive capitalism and rise and fall of empires and abusive marriages and abusive parental abuse and child abuse. We can't do it fast enough. We're not a high enough vibration at third density to take that journey in a linear fashion. We have an opportunity, though, to do this seismic paradigm shifting leap to this fourth density of energy within our cells. We know our cells can hold that much energy because of the phenomena of mitochondria and their ability to release sunlight within our cells. It's a very unique thing that's expressed on this planet right now is mitochondria, and their interplay with the small mitochondria inside of plants, which we call plastids, which most famously are chlorophyll. Take that sunlight, use the sunlight to create a chemical reaction between carbon from CO2 to create long chain carbons in the form of carbohydrates or fatty acids. Carbohydrates and fatty acids are simply battery power, battery storage for solar power. And so when we eat, we're taking all this battery forms of glucose and fatty acids into our cellular structure, and we ignite life within us when the mitochondria break those carbons back apart, back down to CO2, and we release all of this light energy in the process. It turns out you can increase the amount of light energy through the way in which you breathe. You can create more light energy per cubic centimeter by the way in which you eat. You can create more light energy by the way in which you move your body and exercise. You can actually increase the amount of light energy you can hold by the way in which you sleep. You can increase the light energy in the way in which you understand sexual energies to occur in the physical body. These phenomena are what we are now doing. And so as I start closing down my clinic from a medical standpoint, we start revving up this light energy purpose. And so we've created an online program called Journey of Intrinsic Health, understanding that there's no exogenous solution to the disease and dysfunction within us. There's only an endogenous opportunity for complete transformative vitality to happen. And this is where I'm no longer liking the term healer for myself, is I don't want to heal some old wound. I want to get to an energetic state where it's not even possible that wound exists. And so that's, I think, our next jump as a culture, as a scientific community, is let's let go of the healing idea and let's go for the manifestation of this higher state of being. And so in that 8-week journey of intrinsic health, we work on training people to get themselves in this high vibrational state of expression. And now we're working on immersive retreats that we'll do as we close down the clinic. We'll start doing 7-day immersions with people all over the world, where we take 50, 70 people at a time, and we bring them together into a vortex of energetic influence and stimulus to help them learn how to make this paradigm shifting leap, where they start to be able to not only express more light energy within the self, but ultimately begin to sense at a much higher level of neurology their relationship to the cosmos, their relationship to other human beings, their relationship to their own soul. And so there's this opportunity that we have right now to fundamentally change our relationship to the energetic field, whether we call that soul, God, or light energy within the cell. We can fundamentally change that. We have the science at hand to understand how that happens. And we have tens of thousands of years of medical science that was practiced in the form of art, qigong, tai chi, yoga. These things were designed to create light energy within the body. This is an ancient understanding of the movement from a low third density species to a fourth density species. We've been trying to do it through the spiritual context for a long time. And I think medicine became this, sledgehammer to the tripod that we had going of building this energy. And medicine has fundamentally weakened the species. Over the last 50 years of Western medicine, we have expressed more chronic disease than we ever have in history. We've expressed a shortening of lifespans. This whole lengthening of life that we saw in the first half of the century was because of improved access to nutrition, improved access to clean water. So we got there and we got to this like 78, 80 years of life expectancy. Now we're going backwards. The United States now ranks 40th in the world for health outcomes. And some people say 36th or whatever it is. Some people say 50. It depends on which metrics you're using. But we're like so far beyond all other industrial countries. We are the sickest of countries on the planet now. And that's because of our march far past, any connection to this vibrational potential and our incredible codependence on chemicals. And so we have become codependent with our chemical food industry, our chemical pharmaceutical industry, our chemical drug industry for recreational drugs, be it caffeine to cocaine to whatever it is. This phenomenon that's going on in the United States with the legalization of hemp is very interesting. Hemp and CBD and THC have some interesting properties from a medicinal standpoint. But if you're just giving this to cover up a wound that is unhealed, you've only created a drug. It's not a healing tool. It is a drug that you're using as a Band-Aid on a wound that is not healing because you're not at the cause of it. There is no source of pain within the human being that is a result of a lack of marijuana. That doesn't happen. That's not why they have pain. And so if you now think you're a holistic doctor because you're going to go use plant medicine to treat the pain, you have to remind yourself that you're doing the same thing that your colleagues with the pharmaceutical narcotics or whatever it is are doing. We are all covering up the pain. And if we keep doing that, we may be at a drugged up, numbed out state when we go extinct, but we will not avoid the extinction. We have to go through the pain, not avoid the pain, if we're going to find the real source of the injury, of the pain, of the wound. And within that wound is the antidote. We will find the reason it was there in the first place. And that is the antidote to the injury in and of itself. And so as a physician, not only do you need to stop fearing death, you need to stop fearing pain. You need to stop fearing the wound within the person in front of you. And you need to understand that is the path. Go into that. Go into that with that patient. Tell me about the heartbreak that you have. I know you just had your third heart attack. What are you heartbroken over? What did you think your life was going to be versus what it's become? Where are your heartbreaks? Go find the pain. Go find the source of the pain. It's not clogged arteries. That's never caused pain. The pain is from some psycho-emotional spiritual disconnect within that human being that then left them with this vortex of dysfunctional energy in the space that we would call a heart organ. And that led to dysfunction and disease as the physics of emotional trauma started to program biology to a dysfunctional state. But it wasn't a clogged artery that started that path. Clogged artery was a far downstream phenomenon of a vibrational imprint of an emotional trauma that had no social training as to how to relieve the body. So we need to train each other how to make these emotions process through the body. And what that's going to look like is a lot of song and dance. We are going to sing more. We're going to dance more, especially around fires at night, because that's how we became the third density of light as a species, is we learned to capture fire. And it separated us from the primates, and it gave us a new leg up on this capacity for adaptation. And we learned to sing and dance and create art at that fireside. and it increased our vibration. So as we look for this fourth density, we're going to go back to the future, and we're going to pull forward the vibrational events that allowed our species to emerge from the milieu of life potential. And we are going to try to do a paradigm leap forward. And we will push that through a single individual. And if one individual can make that jump to fourth density, I'm pretty sure we can all shift rapidly, because that fourth density creature is going to have so much connectivity, so much sense of ability to connect to everything, that they will become hyper intelligent, hyper social. They will be a magnet for energy. Yeah. And so that's what I do wake up every morning, is I think about, how do I become the one person to jump? Not because I'm egotistical about it, because I'm fucking interested. What is it going to feel like to be the fourth density of light? And that is a driving force. And so when I make my breakfast in the morning, I just had my favorite breakfast, which is this sourdough bread with this German mustard on it, with avocado and sprouts and some fermented cabbage. And when I'm making that, my whole focus is on, what is it going to feel like when I eat this thing? And I certainly enjoy the taste of it, and the whole gustatory neurologic thing is fascinating, but I get much more vibe when I start to think about, right now in my cells, I'm exploding with life energy right now, light energy. And my light, my love, my life is what you're feeling by being around me right now. And I'm finding myself to be a pleasant person to be around when I'm in that high vibrational state. To get there, I've had to let go of a lot of layers of definitions and finite titles and beliefs about myself, and beliefs about what makes me a good person, or all of these senses of duty and responsibility that were actually holding me down. I want to be a light bulb for you. I want you to be a light bulb for me. I want to light you up. I want you to light me up. That's the interplay that we get to do now in life, as we start to understand this last opportunity we have, perhaps on this planet right now, to make this fourth density shift before we get a major reset back down to first density through a massive extinction event, as we've seen over and over again. It takes us about 30 million years to recover from a mass extinction event and see the light vibration build back up in life. But excitingly, it always comes back more intelligent and more bright. And so when we saw that last great extinction 55 million years ago, we didn't struggle back as a planet to reinvent the dinosaurs. We didn't struggle back to rebirth all the ferns that existed. Instead, the planet came up with flowering plants, deciduous trees, evergreens, came up with mammals, came up with humans, because there was more potential in the environment because of the extinction. When we put extinction level stress on the planet, every organism starts making viruses. Viruses are new genetic potentials. And so when you put extinction level stress on 7.9 billion humans right now, we are leaving behind a massive potential for the next fourth density beings. The next beings can reach fourth density because of the stress we're currently under, which is an interesting way to re-understand the stress we're under. Maybe it's not bad that we're all in pain. Maybe it's not bad that we're all stressed out. Maybe it's not bad that we keep doing war on one another. Maybe it is actually the path that nature knows has to occur to bring this planet up to that fourth density. Maybe we need the stress to have the full expression of potential of the genomic code. And so maybe our role as humans was to show up in such volume, 7.9, by 2050 will be at 9 billion people. Maybe we needed 9 billion people to reach the genetic potential out there in the biome. Or we are the thing that will shift to the fourth density, and we will become the higher expression of beauty and love and light on the planet. Either one is a beautiful path. Either one does not need to feel guilt for it. Either one does not need to be, heartached over. Both are beautiful potentials if we go into them awake. The real danger we have, perhaps the only danger we have, is that we don't pay attention to the moment that we're in. And we drug ourselves up and we distract ourselves through, endless content on Instagram or TikTok or Netflix or whatever distraction we pick today. And we don't realize what it feels like to be alive and looking at another human being and rising that vibration.
I'm hearing the music now. My cells are dancing, my mitochondria is dancing through these magnetic waves that are uniting us. And thank you for redefining what a podcast conversation can be. and how can we use everything from making breakfast in the morning to having a conversation with a friend to potentially going on with your day and attending your business agenda that you have, and to really embody this new dimension and showing us that we don't need leaders to show us the map. We don't need books to tell us what to do. The map is already there. We are the map. And I think that's basically stepping out of linearity into this multidimensional circularity and interdependence that we're made of. Dr. Zach, the journey of intrinsic health, I believe, begins in April 22nd. Is that correct?
Yeah, the next cohort goes through the next 8-week period there. So you're welcome to check it out, journeyofintrinsichealth.com. And we'd be excited for you to be part of that community. Not only is it an 8-week journey looking at kind of the 8 building blocks of biology as it relates to biophysics, but it's also a community. And so we've launched an app so that everybody going through the program gets to stay in touch. And we get to see that community starting to spawn new ideas and creativity together of what the future is that we want to create together. And so it's really, when you're not just signing up for an 8-week program, you're signing up for a lifetime of aligning yourself with other people around the planet that want to see this jump happen.
I think that's beautiful. We'll put more information in the show notes. And well, to tell you the truth, I have a lot of things to keep talking about, a lot of questions, but I know I now have this feeling that those conversations have already happened and that they can keep happening even if we just hang up this call. So thank you for reminding me about that, and to reminding me that the conversation is ongoing and I'm part of it, and I am enough to be part of this conversation. So I don't know if you want to add anything else. I just want to thank you for your beautiful time, your smile, and your amazing energy.
Thank you, Victor. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I love all of you for being here right now at the tipping point of humanity. I love you all for your attention to this topic. I always feel at the end of a podcast that there was a great presence in that conversation. And each of you, regardless of when you listen to this, are part of the present energy within the conversation. And if you hear something within it that resonates for you, I guarantee you it is the space between my words, or between the words of Victor and I, that have ignited you. Between my words, between those words that we share, is a lot of space. So in every conversation, we've created an energetic portal, if you will, an energetic deck of information that is mostly vacuum space. And in the vacuum space, you will feel yourself. You will feel your North Star, your compass aligning with the deeper truths that you know for yourself. And so if you feel like you've been changed by the conversation, know that it was an intrinsic, endogenous event. You got to hear yourself in this message that Victor is sharing with you. And so I'm very excited to hold space and time with you so we can create that vibrational opportunity for our future. Blessings on all of you.
Thank you, Zach. And I think you've proven that magic realism can also be spoken and written in English.
All right. My thesis was much better in Spanish than its English translation.
Okay, my friend, you have a great day, and we're here.
Thank you so much. So much.